What if there is a plant that, when you taste it, makes sugar taste like nothing at all? Not less sweet, nothing. You could eat a spoonful of sugar right after chewing this plant's leaves, and your tongue simply would not register it as sweet. This is not a trick. It is a real compound that blocks the sugar receptors on your tongue, and the same plant appears to help the pancreas recover some of its ability to produce insulin. It has been used in India for 2,000 years for exactly this purpose, and its name in Sanskrit translates to sugar destroyer. Today, I am walking you through 20 plants with real, documented effects on blood sugar control, starting with that sugar destroyer. And stick around because number 6 has been compared directly to metformin, one of the most prescribed diabetes medications in the world, in multiple clinical studies. And number 20 is a spice that Jesus himself named specifically in the Gospel of Matthew, which slows down how fast your body absorbs carbohydrates. Number 1. Gymnema sylvester, a vine native to India whose name in Sanskrit, gurmar, literally means destroyer of sugar. Because chewing its leaves blocks your tongue's ability to taste sweetness for up to an hour, while research suggests its compounds may also help the pancreas regenerate some of the cells that produce insulin. Gymnema sylvester has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for over 2,000 years specifically for what traditional texts called madhumeha, honey urine, the ancient description of diabetes, named because the urine of untreated diabetics attracted ants due to its sugar content. The plant's most famous property is immediate and almost startling. Gymnemic acid, the primary compound in the leaves, binds to the sweet taste receptors on the tongue and blocks them. Chew a gymnema leaf, then taste sugar, and you will taste nothing. The sweetness simply does not register. This effect lasts up to an hour and applies to natural sugar, artificial sweeteners, and sweet fruit alike. Beyond this taste-blocking effect, research has found that gymnema reduces the absorption of sugar in the intestine and, in animal studies, appears to support the regeneration of beta cells, the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. Clinical studies in humans with type 2 diabetes have found that gymnema supplementation reduces fasting blood sugar and HbA1c, the long-term blood sugar marker that doctors use to track diabetes control. A plant whose effect you can feel within seconds of tasting it has 2,000 years of traditional use and a growing body of modern research behind the same application. Number 2 works through a mechanism that researchers have called genuinely insulin-like, not just supportive of insulin, but mimicking what insulin itself does in the body. Number 2. Bitter melon, Momordica carrantia, a vegetable eaten throughout Asia and Africa that contains compounds researchers have described as functioning almost like a plant-based insulin, helping cells absorb sugar from the blood in a way that closely resembles what your body's own insulin does. Bitter melon looks like a warty cucumber and tastes exactly as its name suggests, intensely bitter. That bitterness comes from compounds including charantin and a polypeptide that researchers have nicknamed plant insulin because of how closely it behaves like the hormone your pancreas produces. These compounds help glucose move out of your bloodstream and into your cells, lowering blood sugar through a pathway that does not depend entirely on your own insulin production working perfectly. This matters enormously for people whose pancreas is producing insulin, but whose cells have become resistant to it, which describes the majority of people with type 2 diabetes. Multiple clinical studies have found that bitter melon reduces fasting blood sugar and improves blood sugar response after meals. It has been used as both food and medicine throughout India, China, the Caribbean, and Africa for generations, prepared as a vegetable in cooking, as a juice, or dried into a tea. The vegetable that most people avoid because of its harsh flavor is doing something in the body that comes remarkably close to what an injection of insulin does, without the needle. Number 3. White mulberry leaf, Morus alba, approved as an actual medication for blood sugar control in Japan, where its compounds slow down how quickly your intestines absorb sugar from food, meaning the sugar from your meal enters your bloodstream more gradually instead of all at once. White mulberry leaf occupies an unusual position. It is one of the few plants on this list that has gone through formal pharmaceutical development and regulatory approval as a blood sugar medication, specifically in Japan, where it is sold as an approved treatment rather than a supplement. The leaves contain a compound called DNJ that blocks the enzyme your gut uses to break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugar. When that enzyme is blocked, carbohydrates pass through your digestive system more slowly. Sugar enters your bloodstream gradually instead of in a spike, and your pancreas is not forced to release a large burst of insulin all at once. This is the same general approach used by a class of pharmaceutical diabetes drugs called alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. Clinical research has confirmed that white mulberry leaf significantly reduces the blood sugar spike that normally follows a carbohydrate-containing meal. It has been used in traditional Chinese and Japanese medicine for centuries before Japanese pharmaceutical researchers formalized it into an approved medication. The leaf of a tree most people know only because silkworms eat it has become an actual government-approved diabetes treatment in one of the world's most pharmaceutically advanced countries. Number 4. Banaba leaf, Lagerstroemia speciosa, a tree native to Southeast Asia whose corosolic acid compound appears to help open a kind of door on the surface of your cells that allows sugar to move out of the bloodstream and into the cell, where it can actually be used for energy instead of accumulating in the blood. Banaba has been used in the Philippines and across Southeast Asia for generations as a tea for diabetes, prepared from the dried leaves of this ornamental flowering tree. Modern research has identified corosolic acid as the compound responsible for its effects. Every cell in your body has glucose transporter proteins on its surface, essentially doors that open to let sugar in from the bloodstream when triggered by insulin. Corosolic acid appears to help trigger these same doors to open, allowing glucose to move into cells even when insulin signaling is not working as efficiently as it should, which is precisely the problem in insulin resistance, the underlying issue in most type 2 diabetes. Clinical research has found that banaba leaf extract reduces blood sugar levels in people with type 2 diabetes, with effects appearing within hours of supplementation and continuing with regular use. The tree, grown as an ornamental flowering plant in gardens throughout the Philippines and Southeast Asia, valued for generations primarily for its appearance, has been quietly functioning as a blood sugar medicine in traditional households long before corosolic acid was identified as the reason why. Number 5. Black seed, Nigella sativa, described in ancient prophetic tradition as the cure for everything except death, whose thymoquinone compound research suggests may help regenerate the actual cells in your pancreas that produce insulin. Not just manage symptoms, but potentially repair the underlying problem. Most blood sugar interventions, plant or pharmaceutical, work by managing the symptoms of diabetes, slowing sugar absorption, helping cells use insulin more efficiently, or reducing how much sugar the liver releases. Black seed is interesting because some of the research on thymoquinone, its primary active compound, suggests something more ambitious: actual regeneration of pancreatic beta cells, the cells that produce insulin in the first place. In animal studies, black seed has been shown to increase the number and function of these insulin-producing cells, which would represent addressing the root cause rather than only the downstream effect. Clinical studies in humans with type 2 diabetes have found that black seed supplementation significantly reduces fasting blood sugar and HbA1c, with some studies finding effects substantial enough to allow dose reductions in diabetes medications under medical supervision. Black seed has been used medicinally across the Middle East for over 3,000 years and was found among the burial treasures of Tutankhamun. The seed, considered valuable enough to bring into the afterlife, is now being studied for its potential to help repair the very cells whose failure defines type 2 diabetes. Number 6. Berberine, found in golden seal, barberry, and Oregon grape, the plant compound that has been studied head-to-head against metformin, one of the most widely prescribed diabetes medications in the world, in multiple clinical trials, with results showing comparable blood sugar reduction. Berberine is the plant compound that has attracted the most serious clinical research attention for blood sugar control, precisely because it has been tested in the kind of rigorous, direct comparison studies that most herbal compounds never undergo. Several clinical trials have compared berberine directly against metformin, the first-line pharmaceutical treatment for type 2 diabetes worldwide, and found that berberine produced reductions in fasting blood sugar, post-meal blood sugar, and HbA1c that were comparable to the pharmaceutical drug. The mechanism involves activating an enzyme inside your cells called AMPK, which essentially acts like a master switch that tells your cells to take up more glucose from the blood and burn it for energy more efficiently. This is the same general pathway that metformin activates. Berberine also appears to improve the health of the gut bacteria involved in blood sugar regulation. Combining berberine with metformin in some clinical studies produced better results than either one alone, suggesting they may work well together rather than as competing options. The plant compound from a yellow-rooted herb has gone through more rigorous head-to-head pharmaceutical comparison than almost any other natural blood sugar intervention available. Number 7. Sage, Salvia officinalis. The kitchen herb whose compounds appear to reduce how much sugar your liver releases into your bloodstream, addressing one of the lesser-known causes of high blood sugar that has nothing to do with what you ate. Most people assume blood sugar comes entirely from food. In reality, your liver constantly produces and releases its own glucose into your bloodstream, especially overnight and between meals to keep your brain and body supplied with energy. In type 2 diabetes, the liver often releases far more glucose than the body needs, contributing significantly to elevated blood sugar even when someone has not eaten recently, which is part of why fasting blood sugar can be high even in people who eat carefully. Sage has traditionally been used across Mediterranean and European folk medicine for diabetes, and modern research has found that sage compounds reduce this excess glucose release from the liver, working through a pathway related to the one that metformin uses to address the same problem. Clinical studies have found that sage supplementation reduces fasting blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes. The herb most people only think of in the context of Thanksgiving, stuffing has a documented effect on one of the most overlooked mechanisms behind high blood sugar, what your liver is doing while you sleep. Number 8. Milk thistle, Silybum marianum, known primarily for liver support, whose silymarin compound addresses a connection between liver health and blood sugar control that almost nobody discusses, because a struggling liver is directly involved in poor blood sugar regulation. The liver and blood sugar control are far more connected than most people realize. The liver stores and releases glucose, processes the hormones involved in blood sugar regulation, and is directly affected by the same inflammatory and metabolic stress that drives insulin resistance. Fatty liver disease, now extremely common and closely linked to type 2 diabetes, creates a cycle where a struggling liver makes blood sugar control harder, and poor blood sugar control makes the liver work harder, each problem feeding the other. Milk thistle has been used for liver support for over 2,000 years, and its primary compound, silymarin, has confirmed antioxidant and protective effects on liver cells. Clinical research in people with type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease has found that milk thistle supplementation improves both liver function markers and blood sugar control, including reductions in fasting glucose and HbA1c. The plant most people associate exclusively with liver detox support turns out to have a direct line to blood sugar regulation through an organ that almost no mainstream diabetes advice ever mentions. If this is making you think about having some of these plants available, not just knowing they exist but knowing how to actually grow, prepare, and use them, there is a complete practical guide in the first pinned comment below. The knowledge in this video becomes useful when you have the system to apply it. Link is pinned below. Number 9. Fenugreek, Trigonella funum graecum, whose seeds are packed with a specific type of fiber that thickens in your digestive system and physically slows down how fast carbohydrates can be broken down and absorbed, smoothing out the blood sugar spike that normally follows a meal. Fenugreek seeds contain an unusually high concentration of soluble fiber called galactomannan, which absorbs water and forms a thick gel inside your digestive tract. This gel physically slows the movement of food through the gut and creates a barrier that delays the breakdown and absorption of carbohydrates, meaning the sugar from your meal reaches your bloodstream more gradually rather than all at once. This is a mechanical, physical mechanism rather than a chemical one, which is part of why fenugreek's effects are so consistently reproducible across studies. Multiple randomized controlled trials have confirmed that fenugreek seed supplementation, particularly when taken before or with meals, significantly reduces the blood sugar spike that follows eating and improves fasting blood sugar with regular use. Fenugreek has been used in Indian, Middle Eastern, and North African cooking and medicine for thousands of years. The seeds have a distinctive, slightly bitter, maple-like flavor and are a common ingredient in curry blends. The same seed used to season food across multiple cuisines is simultaneously slowing down the digestion of that food in a way that protects against the blood sugar spike a high-carbohydrate meal would otherwise produce. Number 10. Dandelion root, Taraxacum officinale, the same weed most people spend their weekends pulling out of their lawn, whose root appears to stimulate the pancreas to release more insulin, while its fiber content feeds the beneficial gut bacteria associated with better blood sugar control. Dandelion root has a longer and more specific history in diabetes treatment than most people realize. It appears in traditional Chinese medicine, European folk medicine, and Native American herbal traditions, all independently identifying it for conditions resembling diabetes. Modern research has found that dandelion root compounds appear to stimulate the pancreas to increase insulin secretion, directly addressing one side of the blood sugar equation. Separately, dandelion root is exceptionally rich in inulin, a type of prebiotic fiber that specifically feeds beneficial bacteria in the gut, including species that research has linked to improved blood sugar regulation and reduced inflammation. Animal studies have found that dandelion root extract significantly reduces blood sugar levels, and the mechanism appears to involve both the direct effect on insulin secretion and the indirect effect through gut bacteria. The plant that homeowners treat as an enemy to be eliminated from every lawn in America has a documented history across 3 independent medical traditions of being used for exactly the condition that affects an enormous and growing percentage of the population those lawns belong to. Number 11. Holy basil, Tulsi Ocimum tenuiflorum. Sacred in Hindu tradition for 3,000 years, whose primary effect on blood sugar comes through an angle almost nobody discusses: reducing the stress hormone cortisol, which independently raises blood sugar regardless of what you eat. Chronic stress raises cortisol, and cortisol directly raises blood sugar. It signals the liver to release stored glucose and makes cells more resistant to insulin, both of which push blood sugar upward independently of diet. This means that someone eating a careful diet but living under chronic stress can still have elevated blood sugar, and addressing diet alone will not fully solve the problem. Holy basil is classified in Ayurvedic medicine as an adaptogen, a category of herbs traditionally used to help the body manage stress, and modern research has confirmed that it measurably reduces cortisol levels. Beyond the stress-cortisol pathway, holy basil compounds also appear to directly improve how efficiently cells respond to insulin. Clinical studies have found that holy basil supplementation reduces fasting and post-meal blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes. The plant, considered sacred enough to be planted at the center of Hindu households for 3,000 years, addresses blood sugar through a pathway that most diabetes advice never mentions. Not what you eat, but what stress is doing to your hormones while you eat it. Number 12. Ginseng, particularly American ginseng, Panax quinquefolius, whose root has been studied in clinical trials for its ability to improve how well your pancreas responds after a meal, helping it release insulin more efficiently when blood sugar rises. Ginseng has been used in Chinese and Korean medicine for thousands of years as a broad tonic for vitality and resilience. But the specific research on American ginseng and blood sugar is more targeted than its general reputation suggests. Clinical trials, including research conducted at the University of Toronto, have found that American ginseng taken before or with meals significantly reduces the blood sugar spike that follows eating, and that this effect appears within the first hour after consumption, fast enough to be clinically meaningful for post-meal blood sugar management specifically. The mechanism appears to involve improving the timing and efficiency of insulin release from the pancreas in response to rising blood sugar, essentially helping the pancreas respond more promptly and appropriately rather than lagging behind the glucose spike. This distinguishes American ginseng's primary application from many other plants on this list that focus on fasting blood sugar. Its strongest evidence is specifically for the after-meal spike, which is increasingly recognized as an important and independent risk factor for diabetes complications, even in people whose fasting blood sugar looks acceptable. Number 13. Cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum and Cinnamomum cassia, the kitchen spice whose compounds make your cells more responsive to insulin, essentially turning up the volume on the insulin signal your body is already sending, so that less of it is needed to do the same job. Insulin resistance, the central problem in type 2 diabetes, means your cells are not responding adequately to the insulin your pancreas produces, requiring more and more insulin to achieve the same blood sugar-lowering effect, until eventually the pancreas cannot keep up. Cinnamon compounds appear to improve the sensitivity of insulin receptors on cells, meaning the same amount of insulin produces a stronger glucose-lowering effect. This is functionally similar to what several classes of pharmaceutical diabetes medications are designed to achieve. Multiple clinical trials have found that cinnamon supplementation reduces fasting blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes, though the magnitude of effect varies between studies, likely due to differences in the specific cinnamon species and preparation used. Cassia cinnamon, the common grocery store variety, and true Ceylon cinnamon have somewhat different compound profiles. The spice, sitting in nearly every kitchen cabinet in America, used almost exclusively for flavor, has a documented mechanism for addressing the central biological problem in type 2 diabetes, making the insulin you already have work harder for you. Number 14. Aloe vera, Aloe barbadensis Miller, known mostly for skin and sunburn care, whose internal use has been studied in clinical trials and meta-analyses, with consistent findings of reduced fasting blood sugar and improved HbA1c in people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. Most people only know aloe vera as the gel they apply to a sunburn, but the plant has a long history of internal use in traditional medicine across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia for digestive and metabolic conditions, including what would today be recognized as diabetes. Modern research has caught up to this traditional internal application specifically. A meta-analysis combining multiple randomized controlled trials found that aloe vera supplementation significantly reduced fasting blood sugar and HbA1c in people with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes, with effects substantial enough to be clinically meaningful. The mechanism appears to involve multiple pathways, including improved insulin sensitivity and protective effects on pancreatic cells, though the precise mechanism is still being characterized in ongoing research. Aloe vera juice, prepared from the inner gel with the outer leaf and latex removed to avoid the laxative compounds in the outer portion, is the typical preparation used in these studies. The same plant sitting on windowsills across America for sunburn relief has a quietly accumulating body of clinical evidence for an application almost nobody who owns one is using it for. Number 15. Okra, Abelmoschus esculentus, a common vegetable whose slimy texture, the very thing that makes some people avoid it, comes from a soluble fiber that slows sugar absorption in the gut the same way fenugreek does, making it one of the most accessible blood sugar-friendly vegetables available. The mucilage that gives okra its characteristic slippery texture, the texture that drives some people away from the vegetable entirely, is a soluble fiber that behaves in the digestive tract very similarly to the galactomannan fiber in fenugreek. It forms a gel that slows the rate at which carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed, smoothing out the blood sugar response to a meal rather than allowing a sharp spike. Research has found that okra reduces blood sugar levels in animal studies and in preliminary human research, with the fiber-based mechanism providing a plausible and well-understood explanation that does not depend on any exotic or hard-to-source compound. Okra has been a dietary staple across West African, Southern American, Indian, and Middle Eastern cuisines for centuries, valued partly for its texture in stews and partly, traditional practitioners would say, for its health benefits. Unlike many of the plants on this list that require sourcing a specific supplement or tincture, okra is a vegetable available in any grocery store, and the mechanism behind its blood sugar benefit is one of the simplest and most mechanically intuitive on this entire list: fiber slowing down digestion. Number 16. Turmeric, Curcuma longa, whose curcumin compound addresses blood sugar from an entirely different angle than most plants on this list, by reducing the chronic low-grade inflammation throughout the body that is now understood to be one of the primary drivers of insulin resistance in the first place. For decades, insulin resistance was understood mainly in terms of diet and weight. More recent research has identified chronic low-grade inflammation as a central driver of insulin resistance. Inflammatory signals interfere directly with the cellular machinery that responds to insulin, making cells less able to take up glucose from the blood regardless of how much insulin is present. This reframes blood sugar control as partly an inflammation problem, not purely a sugar or carbohydrate problem. Curcumin, the primary active compound in turmeric, is one of the most extensively studied natural anti-inflammatory compounds in existence, working by inhibiting NF-κB, a master switch that drives inflammatory signaling throughout the body. Clinical trials have found that curcumin supplementation improves insulin sensitivity and reduces the progression from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes in at-risk populations. A landmark study published in Diabetes Care found that curcumin extract reduced the conversion rate from prediabetes to diabetes essentially to zero in the treatment group over the 9-month study period, compared to a meaningful number of conversions in the placebo group. The golden spice used across Ayurvedic medicine for 4,000 years for inflammatory conditions turns out to be addressing one of the root causes of blood sugar dysfunction that most dietary advice never directly targets. Number 17. Ginger, Zingiber officinale, whose compounds help your muscles pull more sugar out of the bloodstream to use as energy, addressing blood sugar control through the largest glucose-using tissue in your entire body. Muscle tissue is responsible for absorbing the majority of the glucose that leaves your bloodstream after a meal, far more than any other tissue in the body, which is part of why physical activity is so effective for blood sugar control. Ginger compounds, particularly gingerols, appear to improve the efficiency with which muscle cells take up glucose, essentially supporting the same process that exercise activates through a chemical pathway rather than a physical one. Research has also found that ginger improves insulin sensitivity more broadly and reduces fasting blood sugar in clinical studies of people with type 2 diabetes. A meta-analysis combining multiple randomized controlled trials confirmed significant reductions in fasting blood sugar and HbA1c with regular ginger supplementation. Ginger has been used across Asian, Middle Eastern, and Indian medicine for thousands of years, primarily for digestive complaints. But its effect on muscle glucose uptake represents a mechanism that connects it directly to the tissue, doing the most work in clearing sugar from your blood after every meal you eat. Number 18. Moringa oleifera, called the miracle tree across tropical regions where it grows, whose leaves are exceptionally rich in compounds that specifically blunt the blood sugar spike that follows a meal, while also delivering more protein, calcium, and potassium per gram than almost any other leafy green. Moringa leaves have one of the most extraordinary nutrient profiles of any commonly available plant. More protein gram for gram than most other leafy vegetables, exceptional calcium and potassium content, and a dense supply of antioxidants. For blood sugar specifically, research conducted in countries where moringa is widely consumed has found that moringa leaf powder added to a meal significantly reduces the post-meal blood sugar spike compared to the same meal without it. The isothiocyanate compounds in moringa appear to support healthier glucose metabolism, and the overall nutrient density of the leaf, protein and fiber, both slow digestion and reduce the glycemic impact of a meal, contributes to the effect through multiple simultaneous pathways rather than a single mechanism. Clinical studies in people with type 2 diabetes have found reductions in fasting blood sugar with regular moringa leaf consumption. The tree that grows prolifically across tropical Africa and Asia, often dismissed in Western nutrition discussions despite its nutrient profile rivaling or exceeding kale and spinach, offers one of the most nutritionally complete blood sugar interventions on this entire list. Number 19. Stevia rebaudiana, the natural sweetener with essentially zero impact on blood sugar, which research suggests may go a step further and actually provide a small protective benefit to the pancreas, distinguishing it from artificial sweeteners that some research has linked to negative metabolic effects. Stevia leaves are roughly 40 times sweeter than sugar by weight, but contain compounds called steviol glycosides that pass through the digestive system without being broken down into glucose, meaning stevia produces no blood sugar spike at all, a fact that has made it one of the most popular natural sugar substitutes for people managing diabetes. What is less widely known is that some research has found stevia compounds may have a mild direct benefit on insulin secretion and glucose tolerance, beyond simply not raising blood sugar the way sugar does. This stands in contrast to some research on artificial sweeteners, which has raised concerns about negative effects on gut bacteria and metabolic health with regular long-term use. Stevia has been used for centuries by the Guarani people of Paraguay, who called it ka'ahe'e, sweet herb, and used it to sweeten food and medicine long before it reached global markets. For anyone managing blood sugar who still wants the experience of sweetness without the metabolic consequence, the plant that produces it naturally appears to be not just neutral, but potentially mildly beneficial, a distinction that matters when choosing between sugar substitutes. Number 20. Cumin, the spice Jesus named specifically in Matthew 23:23, valuable enough that the Pharisees tithed it to the temple, whose compounds slow the digestive enzymes responsible for breaking down carbohydrates, and whose 3,000-year history of use closes this list with the same principle that runs through all 20 plants. The knowledge of what works was available long before anyone could explain why. Cumin has been used medicinally across the Middle East, India, and North Africa for at least 3,000 years, and its appearance in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus acknowledges its genuine value while criticizing misplaced religious priorities, tells us it was considered significant enough to be tithed to the temple, alongside mint and dill. Modern research has found that cumin compounds inhibit the digestive enzymes responsible for breaking starches and complex carbohydrates down into absorbable sugar, working through a mechanism similar to fenugreek and white mulberry, but through a different specific compound. Clinical trials have found that cumin supplementation meaningfully reduces fasting blood sugar and HbA1c in people with type 2 diabetes, with some studies finding effects comparable to certain pharmaceutical interventions for early-stage blood sugar management. The spice, valuable enough to bring before God in temple worship 2,000 years ago, is, today, demonstrating exactly the kind of measurable clinical effect that modern medicine looks for. It closes this list because it captures something true about every plant on it. These compounds were always doing what people observed them doing. The research did not make them work. It only explained finally why they always had. 20 plants, each one with a documented effect on blood sugar, through mechanisms ranging from blocking your taste buds to mimicking insulin, to calming the stress hormones that raise glucose independently of food. Type 2 diabetes affects over 37 million Americans, and millions more have prediabetes without knowing it. These plants are not a replacement for medical care, and anyone on diabetes medication should never adjust their treatment without their physician's guidance. But they represent a category of knowledge that traditional medicine accumulated through generations of careful observation. Knowledge that modern clinical research keeps confirming, one study at a time. Hit the like button if this changed how you think about blood sugar. Drop a comment and tell me which plant surprised you most. Subscribe and ring the bell. I will see you in the next one.